Alright, this video is going to be some documenting of my Keezer build. I've had a freezer for quite some time now, and I've got an external controller on it that kept it at a nice temperature, and it housed 3 kegs of beer, a bottle of CO2, and a handful of 6-packs. It's been servicing me great for quite a while, but I wanted to enhance it, make it a little more pretty and a little more user friendly and usable. So I decided to turn it into a true Keezer, add some taps, and extend the lid up a little bit so I can put 4 kegs in it. What you're looking at here is what I started with. This is my 7 cubic foot Frigidaire freezer. Purchased it at Menards a couple years ago. I believe paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $175 for it. You can look at the inside here. Again, as I said, it's got 3 kegs, couple 6-packs. The 6-packs are on top of the bottle. That's all you can get out of it. The kegs have picnic taps on them. Works okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but I want it a little better. Alright, here's the beginning of my build. After measuring the sides of the freezer, I built a frame out of 2x8 lumber. And if you'll see laying on top of it, I've got a 1x8 oak board that I've got the corners mitered. And what I'm going to do is wrap the 2x8 lumber frame with 1x8 oak and then stain it and make it look nice. You can see here that I've attached the 1x8 to the front of it. You can see the miter in the corner. Got my framing nailer sitting on top. I actually used a finish nailer to put the front on it. But that'll give the idea to start. Here you see me a little bit further along. You'll notice that I've got all 3 of the front sides, the exposed sides, nailed to the 2x8 frame. And you can see that I've also built a frame for the top that the lid's going to sit on top of. It's sticking out a little bit for design purposes, and it's pretty much ready for me to stain. Now here's looking at the top frame from the top. You can see I've got some putty in, filling the holes. And got my sander there, sanding it nice and smooth, making it look good. Alright, here you see a top view right after my first coat of stain. And you'll notice that around the inside edges I have ridges routed all the way around. The back side I've got 2 ridges, and on the front I've got 1. Those are necessary because of the inside of the lid of the freezer. It does have some steps that go down, and the ridges were necessary so that it fits fine. So the gasket of the lid is going to fit on the very top, and then as the inside of the lid steps down, it'll sit down in those ridges that I've created. Here you see the top after a coat or 2 of poly. Obviously it's nice and shiny. Looks really nice. What you're seeing here in the forefront of the picture are some tap handles that I've got hanging from some strings. I built these just out of some scrap wood. Cut them down, sanded them nice and smooth, rounded out the edges. You see a 45-degree angle on the bottom there. Drilled a hole in the bottom of them and epoxied a nut in that hole. Now the standard thread for a keg faucet is a 3/8 16 thread. So what I did is I just epoxied a 3/8 16 nut in the hole, and works pretty good. Here's a picture of what it looks like on the faucet attached to the shank. It's kind of a fuzzy picture, but it gives you an idea. Here's a side view of the same thing. Again, Here I've got the 4 holes all drilled and the faucets in place and mounted. I can see one of them's got the tap handle on it. I believe I had to drill 1-inch holes for this. I had heard people say on other boards and other videos that they did have issues with heat loss around the collar, making it hard to keep the temperature consistent throughout the Keezer. So I decided I'd put some styrofoam around mine, and what I did is picked up some styrofoam at the home center at Menards, cut it to size, and using caulk glued it in place. Now you can see that this is looking from the underside, and I butted it up really snug against the top frame, so hopefully it'll be a really nice seal. So far I don't seem to see any leakage at all. I did make the holes around the shanks a little larger so I could get at the shank nuts. Alright, well, here's the initial finished product. The lid's put on, screwed to the back of the frame. You can see the cords hanging off to the side, and they go to the controller that's off to the side, and worked pretty good. There's a little hole in the back of the collar that I caulked shut, and it's got the thermostat going through it. It's also got a wire going through it that I put a fan on the inside to try and circulate the air. This picture here is showing the inside of it. You can see the fan sitting on top of the kegs there. Works pretty well. You'll also notice that now I've got 4 kegs instead of 3. Well, I decided I didn't really like the controller on the outside, so I stripped it down and took it apart and decided that I was going to mount it on the collar itself. So that's just what I did. I put the temperature controller right on the front to the right side of where the tappers are. Here's what it looks like from the inside. You can see I have put a box on the inside, screwed it to the frame, caulked the crap out of it to keep any moisture out. It's there mainly for protection. Really, the controller doesn't stick out inside very far, so it doesn't need to have quite as deep a box as I've got, but that's what I had on hand. You can see the power cords coming out, the inputs to black, the outputs the gray, and you'll notice that the output of the gray goes to the back, and it's a power strip, and that's where the Keezer itself plugs in and where the power supply for the fan plugs in. So whenever the controller turns the Keezer on, it's also going to turn the fan on. Here's the back side of the front where the manifolds come in. You can see I've got beer lines hooked up to them and thumb screws so I can take them off. And here's just an overall picture of the inside of the Keezer. You'll notice I did put a couple shelves, so to speak, on there. They actually sit on the lip of the freezer itself. They're just some laminated floor that I cut into 16 or 16.5 inch lengths, and they fit real nice, slide back and forth. And then in between the 2 laminated shelves, you can see the fan sitting there. And I also put a moisture absorber thing that I got at the dollar store to try and keep the moisture down. One thing that I didn't mention is the 4th keg. Inside the freezer there's actually a shelf surrounding the compressor that sits up about 6 inches. Because of that shelf, a standard size keg would not fit in this Keezer without having the collar around it. It would stick up about 4 inches or 5 inches above the rim of a standard freezer. So adding the collar gave me enough height so I could put that 4th keg in there. I might even be able to fit a 5th keg in there if I really wanted to, if it was a narrow keg, and maybe a 3-gallon keg would fit on the bottom and one of my narrower kegs would fit next to it. But anyway, I didn't mention that. I thought it'd be worth mentioning now. Um, I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out, though. The last thing I want to mention is my tap handles and the tappers. As I mentioned before, I took some scrap oak. I did stain it a little darker than the rest of the wood to set it off. Notched it at the bottom, took the belt sander and another sander, smoothed out the edges, and made it look pretty good, I think. You'll notice the labels on the front. What those are just miniatures of labels that I put on bottles that I make in PowerPoint. Instead of printing them as a full sheet, I print it as a presentation note sheet, and it shrinks them down to be just the right size for my tap handles. I got them on the tap handles with glue stick, just the same kind of glue stick your kid uses at school. Um, I think it's going to work pretty good. It'll be sturdy enough to go through the keg, and it'll peel off pretty easily and clean up once the keg's gone. So I thought that was a pretty decent idea my wife came up with. Anyway, you can also notice that underneath the taps themselves, I don't have a drip tray. That is something I'm going to figure out how to do. But what I did in the interim is take a handful of 2-liter bottles and cut them out and put a hole in the back of them. They'll go over the tap handles and the faucets, and it will save some drips. And if you look real close, you can kind of see some drips in it already from testing them out. Anyway, another idea I thought might be worth sharing. So there it is. My kegerator, my Keezer, my Tappinator. I think I'm going to get years of use out of it, and it's going to be great. I hope this video was helpful. If you want to leave some comments, feel free. Enjoy the feedback. If you got any ideas of anything that I've done that maybe I could modify, make it a little better, let me know. Cheers.